And thank you, T, for introducing us, getting us rolling. Thanks so much. Good to see you again, my friend. And well, we got so many friends from around the world. This is a great meeting. This is great. Again, just thank you for allowing me to be here. My name is Michael Donnelly. I'm an alcoholic, and I have a home group. It's the Treasure Map meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. You're welcome to join us if you ever have nothing going on a Thursday. We are a hybrid meeting. We meet in person in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So if you're ever just wandering aimlessly through the United States and you end up in South Dakota on a Thursday, come join us. If you're looking for a good Zoom meeting, we also do that. But it's my home group and I love it. And I think it's probably the best meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous everywhere, or I'd change my home group. But I love it. I absolutely love it. I have a sponsor, and I sponsor men, and it is a great gift to be involved in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been asked to share a little bit tonight about my experience on step 11, and I'm going to do that. And we'll just jump right in. And I have to sort of frame this a little bit. When I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I remember thinking to myself, all these things, people are talking about prayer all the time. They're talking about meditation. I had this idea in my head about sort of levitating or, sort of doing a mantra. Like I had no idea like where to even begin. And my sponsor sat me down, and what he said to me was, look, the thing that makes step 11 amazing, the thing that makes step 11 change your life is not step 11. And I was like, what? He said, oh no, it's 1 through 10 and 12. It's everything that brackets step 11 that gives meaning to step 11. And I was like, okay. And I didn't know what he was talking about, right? And so he said, look, the first thing let's do is let's just get through the steps. You can start reading page 84 through 88 every morning, every evening. You don't need to get to some spot on up to the first 83 pages before you jump into 84. Just start doing it, brother. Just start doing it. And I did that. And, I ran across some things salt and peppered through the other steps called prayers. And I ran across some other things that the steps call for, like thinking about stuff, like what is your concept of God? On page 47 in our big book, it says, when therefore we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. This applies too to other spiritual expressions which you find in this book. And then it says, do not be afraid to honestly ask yourself what these words mean to you. That's contemplation. I had no idea that Bill Wilson was setting me up to practice certain tenets of contemplation, meditation, early on. And then we get to, the third step after step 2, go through all the we agnostic stuff, right? Bill Wilson is saying that he thinks we're lovers and he thinks we're worshipers and he thinks we're but we're worshiping and loving the wrong things. I had to think about that, scratch my head a little bit. I had hair back then. I had to move the hair out of the way, then scratch my head. Now I just scratch it. But, and then we get to this page 62. And our book tells us that God is our Father, that he is our principal, that he is our director, and that we're child and agent. And that made me think a little bit. Thinking about God. I'm just thinking about God. I'm just thinking about what that means to my life. I got to tell you, that is the essence of prayer and meditation. Thinking about life, asking God for help, and being involved in how those two things impact my soul and therefore my mind and therefore my life. And we got to this thing called the third step prayer. And in each little bit of that third step prayer, there's a request and then a reason for the request. God, I offer myself to thee. Request. But for what? To build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self. Request. Why? The reason that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear. All these things, those beautiful prayers in the fourth step that oftentimes get overlooked, right? And then that fourth step, that contemplation, right? Who do I resent? Who do I resent? Writing all that down. These prayers for, we hear a lot of times in the back of the book, and rightly so, I got no problem with it, that we're supposed to pray for the people we resent. That's not bad advice. If you can pray for anybody on planet Earth, do it. That's great advice, right? But in our big book, it asks me to pray for me, right? It says, dear God, save me from being angry, as if I'm the chief victim of my own resentments. God, show me, empower me to cheerfully grant these people that I resent the same pity, patience, and tolerance that I would cheerfully grant a sick friend. God, turn my attention when I'm afraid to who you would have me be. Right? Prayers for sex, right? I mean, how beautiful is it? How beautiful is it that such an act, such an intimate act, the prayer can be involved in that? Like, this is way past not drinking, right? I remember like Alcoholics Anonymous is going to ask me to pray for the right sex ideal. Like, I'm not getting something here. I got to tell you, I wasn't getting any of it, but I was trying really hard. I had no idea that what was wrong with me was not a drinking problem, because that's how I diagnosed what was wrong with me when I came in. It turns out I had something significantly more sinister. I had the threefold malady that we call alcoholism, and that is way worse than a drinking problem, way worse. You see, when my soul is dark, when my soul is full of itself, when my soul can't see past the satiation of its own desires, you become an object to me. You become a pawn on my chessboard, and my goal is to get you to move in such a way that I can have pleasure. That might be physical in nature, but it might also just be a pat on the back for a compliment. It might simply be some way I can increase my wealth. It might be some way I can increase my reputation. But one way or another, if you're the pawn on my chessboard, it's proof that something's broken within my soul. I had no idea that. And as I went through that process, and more importantly, as I practiced that prayer that we call the fifth step, where I admitted to myself and to another person and to God, the exact nature of my wrongs, I got to a spot where I knew I needed him in a way that I didn't know I needed him before. And right at that touch point, step 6 popped in. And our book asked me, am I willing to let God take all of these things? Not some of these things, not the majority of these things, but all of these things. And my honest answer was yes and no, right? I mean, you can have these things because they're causing me pain and trouble and trauma, right? But this stuff, I really like those, right? And then later in my life, I realized that that's the essence of my problem. I don't see things appropriately. I don't understand things appropriately. Sometimes that's my fault, and sometimes it's just because I'm an infant in the spiritual life who is in the process of growing up, and later I will understand it. But whatever that path is, I have to be on it and engaged in it. And then that beautiful 7-step prayer, the 8-step prayer, where we pray for willingness, right? I got to tell you, there's been people that I have hurt in my life, and before I had the courage to go make amends to them face to face, I prayed that God would help them, and I prayed that somehow God would help them forgive me, because I felt bad about what I did. And even though I didn't necessarily have the willingness in the moments to go make those amends, I was still praying for those people, that God would bless those people and help those people. The steps were pushing me to a life of prayer that I was way too cool to call a prayer life, right? I mean, that's kind of a geeky thing to say, right? I have a reputation to uphold. I'm from the south side of Chicago. We don't have prayer lives. That's for weak people. That's for religious people, right? Not for a dying person. Like, I got way too much going on while I was dying to be lowering myself to a prayer life, right? I mean, come on. And then this beautiful part in step 10. Beautiful part where we look for 4 things: selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And when these crop up, the first thing we do is what? We pray. Ask God to remove it. And then there are other things. There are other things that are involved in prayer that I didn't know were parts of prayer, like making restitution. I didn't know that was part of prayer. I didn't know that changing my behavior and the actions I take could very easily be linked with my prayer life. I didn't know those things. So we get to step 11, and I remember those pages. I was reading them all the time. I wasn't necessarily following or answering the questions that are there, but I was reading the paper, reading 84 through 88. And I was pretty happy with myself that I'd gotten there. Started sponsoring people. It's weird. I got to tell you, this is weird. I started praying for the men I sponsor. I started praying that God would not only get and keep them sober, but that they would have good marriages, that their wives would feel the love of our God in their marriage, that their children would be raised in a home where the love of our God was shared openly, passionately, forthrightly, that it became a normal part of life. Because as I began to realize, as sort of the scales of pride began to fall from my eyes, a brand new world came into view, as our book says. And I began to see God and his kingdom in very different ways. And I want to reread what our good buddy T read earlier, which is what Ali asked me to pick as a topic. And it says, now and then, we may be granted a glimpse. What a great word, glimpse of that ultimate reality, which is God's kingdom. And I got to tell you, that was a line that jumped out at me. And I would think about that, glimpse. And I began to see something that was happening in my life as step 11 came alive to me, not only through the actions of step 11, but through the actions of the other steps and prayer being incorporated into them. And it was this, that if I do this over the course of the 30 years that God has granted me sobriety, that little glimpse of God's kingdom became a glance. And my hope is, and my prayer is, that little glance that happens more often now than the glimpse did will eventually become a gaze. That all I will be able to see is him. That all I will be able to look upon is him, no matter what I'm looking at, no matter who it is on this call or any other call or any newcomer meeting or any family member or any customer or any vendor at my work or any clerk in a Walmart, that my glimpse will grow into a glance and eventually a gaze. And maybe an eternal gaze. Wouldn't that be great, right? So I really love that line because to me, it tells the whole story. When I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't think I had any experience with prayer. It turns out I had a lot of it. I didn't know that when I came in, but I did. The very first remembrances that I have of prayer center around this. I was about 30 days sober in the home group that I was at. It was called Lamont Oaks on the south side of Chicago. And they had an old timer versus newcomer softball game. And we all got t-shirts. I was class of 91 right on there. I was so proud, right? And everybody, we were on the other side of everybody in my dugout had class of 91 t-shirts, and everybody on the other side had class of 56 and class of 79 and 82 and 80. They all had their shirts on, right? 91, 91 was mine, but 90 and back, right? Other side. And there were hundreds of people there. There were wives and children, and we were all playing the softball game. It didn't really matter who won, although I thought it mattered who won. Nobody else seemed to on the field. And we were having a great time. And at the end of the game, here's what we did. Everybody got in a circle. Now, I want to be clear about this in case there's some people online that are unfamiliar with it. This was outdoors and in public. I'm going to say that again. It was outdoors and in public. And we all held hands and we began to say the Lord's Prayer. Now, this is an important point because these weirdos in AA were completely fine with other people seeing them do this. I, on the other hand, with my class of 91 t-shirt, was intensely embarrassed that someone might see me praying outside, right? So I'm grabbing hands with someone because I'm obligated to do so, right? So I'm grabbing hands with someone and we start the Our Father. And I get Our Father out of my mouth. And the power that I felt stopped my words. I couldn't say another thing. The whole outline of the softball diamond had kids and spouses and members of AA holding hands saying the Lord's Prayer. It was the most beautiful thing up to that point that I could recollect seeing. And I got "Our Father" out of my mouth. And that was it. I was clammed up. I was shut up. In those days, I didn't cry, right? Because real men don't cry. At least that was the illusion, right? And so I didn't know what to do with that. I was welling with emotion, and I didn't want to expose it at all. And so I just shut up. And I remember looking around. And I thought, I remember thinking to myself, who are these people? Who are these people? It was an extremely powerful experience for me. And what I'm getting at there is that those meetings that I went to, at the beginning, we would say the Serenity Prayer, and at the end of it, we would say the Our Father. And it was those good people that showed up at those meetings, meeting good, meeting bad, I don't know, right? At every meeting I was at, it opened and it closed with prayer. You guys taught me the rudiments, the elements, and the beginnings of praying. Because when I went to meetings, that's what we did, right? I didn't have much understanding of what we were praying or why we were praying. It just seemed like something you did because you always did. And so I was in. Over the course of clearing out some of the cobwebs through steps 4 and 5, I realized some things. I realized as I got into step 6 and 7 that I had been taught to pray from the time I was a little kid. My mom and dad raised me Catholic. They sent me to Catholic school, grammar school, and high school. My dad passed away when I was a little boy. And I'm named after St. Jude. I was almost dead when I was born, and they had brought in some people from the shrine in Chicago and did some things, some prayers and stuff. Gave me a little oil on my forehead and stuff. I thank God I finally recovered. But in my house, St. Jude was a big deal. He was a big deal because he had helped me out. And so when my dad was dying, there was a candle that we used to lit. And my mom taught my sister and I, this is my mom, this is the family I come from. She taught us to kneel in front of that candle and ask God for whatever his will was for my father. I was 6 years old, my mom's telling me. I was going, wow, I was taught a lot of things AA tried to teach me as a little boy. I was taught a lot of things in Alcoholics Anonymous that were refresher courses because of my mom and my grandma and my dad. It went on as I began to think about this, right? I remember feeling really sort of wonderful about that, but still a little confused and scared. And I began to think about more times that I had learned to pray. And I got to tell you, I'm just being honest with you. I think in some way I've always had a faith in God. Now, I'm not sure that I was convinced. Matter of fact, I'm pretty sure I wasn't convinced that a loving God could love a person who did the unloving things that I did to other kids of his that he loved. I was really sure that God couldn't love a person like me after what I had done to his kids. But I got to tell you, something in me almost always knew something was up. And I'll tell you why. Because when I really got down to brass tacks about prayer and what I thought of it and what I think it means, which we'll get to in just a couple minutes, I got to tell you, I was praying a lot. They were all foxhole prayers. And, you know, we do throw a lot of water and sort of wash out these ideas of foxhole prayers. I got to tell you, when you live in a foxhole, that's all you got. And I lived in a foxhole. That was all I could throw up. That was all I could throw up. I prayed next to toilet seats. I prayed in the back of police cars. But my most intense and sincere prayers were the prayers I said when I saw people that I loved turn their backs on me and walk away because they couldn't handle being around me. Those moments broke my heart. And although I didn't necessarily know what to say, and although I didn't necessarily know what was going on, something inside of me would know that I longed to be fixed by a loving God, and I would ask him for help. Please help me. Please, please, please help me. I didn't know that he was listening and hearing that. Now, I got to tell you, I pushed back on him because the next thought would be, okay, put the drink down, go to a meeting. And I would say, next week, I promise that next week I will do that. If you're out there tonight and you think maybe God doesn't really listen to people like you, I can tell you I am like you. And he does listen to us. He does hear those prayers. He desires intimacy with his children. That's what he's about. He is a loving father. My sponsor said to me one day, Mike, what's a loving father do? And I was like, what? He's like, what's a loving father do? I said, a loving father loves his children. He said, you're 100% right. He said, what does a loving child do? I said, well, obviously they love their father. He goes, no, they don't. I was like, what? He goes, you're overthinking it, kid. He used to call me kid, which I didn't like so much. But nonetheless, he was accurate, right? What do loving fathers do? I said, they love their children. He said, what do loving children do? I said, love their fathers. He said, no, they don't. I said, I don't get it. He said, look, when you were a kid, did you let your mother, did you love your mother? I said, yeah. He said, how did your relationships go? I said, it spiraled completely out of control, right? He said, why? I said, I don't know. Like, he would ask me questions I never asked myself before, you know? He said, I'm going to make a suggestion to you and I want you to think about it. Matter of fact, I want you to pray about it. I have a feeling that the reason that your relationship with your mom spun out of control is because you would not let her love you. You wouldn't let her love you. You know, when I thought about that, and it reminded me of this story, and it's a true story. I was a little kid and my mom goes to the front door and she said, when I knew I was in trouble when the Jude came out, when the middle name came out, right? Open the front, Michael Jude, right? Michael Jude, don't go in the street. Okay, Ma, no problem. As soon as the front door shut, everybody in this phone call knows exactly where I went, right in the street. That is the story of my life, by the way. And so she come on, Michael Jude, get on the sidewalk. And I'd scamper up and get up on the sidewalk. Okay, Mom, okay, right? This would happen 4 or 5 times. Finally, I'd get the ear pull, right? I'd get yanked into the house, and that was the end of it. And I would be grounded until I calmed down, or until I decided I would be honorable to my mom and not go in. See, what I did was I refused to let my mother love me. I refused to. It was going to be my way. It was going to be on my terms. And you know, I did the same thing with God. I did the same thing with God. Good fathers love their children, but good children let their fathers love them. They take the love that God offers and they receive it. And I got to tell you, I didn't know how to do that. Steps 4 through 9 cleared away a lot of the garbage that was blocking me from even seeing that love. Step 10 opened up more doors for me on that. But truthfully, it was the intimacy that I found in a practice of 10, 11, and 12 as a way of living that revolutionized my whole attitude toward God and his universe and the people around me. Today, sitting and just doing that, just letting God love me, is an enormous deal. It changes parts of me I can't reach. If I could reach into my heart or reach into my soul and tighten up all the loose lug nuts, right? And maybe trim off a little bit of the excess selfishness and get rid of it, right? If I could grab the cancer of my soul and perform some sort of surgery on it so that I could be a better man, that's wonderful. But you know what? I can't. I can't. Only God can reach into my heart and make my heart of stone a heart of flesh. Only God can reach into my soul and cause it to have not different life, new life. You know, I was told there's 2 kinds of new. There's 2 kinds of new, right? The first is new in the sense that there's a latest in a series. Like if I go out and buy a new car, I haven't really bought a new mode of transportation. I've only bought the latest in the series of the transportations that are called a car. It's a new car. But imagine if there was a brand new way to be transported. That's the new in new life. It isn't just an improvement. It isn't that I had a bad life and now I have less of a bad life and now God helps me have a little bit better life. I don't think that's it. It's almost like this, that I had completely demolished the batteries that were running my life. They no longer exist. They're empty. And what God does is he opens up the compartment and he reaches into his bag of batteries and he puts a new one in. but it empowers me not just to not do bad things. It now empowers me to do things his way. I'll give you an example. I think the best example that Alcoholics Anonymous is a miraculous program isn't that we have liars in here who stay sober. It's that we have liars in here who, ready? They begin to tell the truth. You see, I think AA proves it gets traction when liars become truth tellers. As a former liar, like, that's incredible, right? I mean, I got to tell you, I'm shocked at it, okay? Because I was a professional liar. These lips move, the old adage, we know what's happening, right? But I was so good at it, I was as stunned as the listener. Like, there were times I told lies where I was like, that is a great one. I'm going to write that down. I'm going to need that later. Like, I had no idea what was coming out of my mouth when I opened it up. None. And now that person who neurotically, without a thought process, lied at every turn, suddenly doesn't want to do that anymore. Guys, that's not a better life. That's new life. How about this one? When the thief doesn't just stop stealing, but when the thief becomes generous. How about that? You see, when the liar becomes a truth teller and the thief becomes generous and the selfish becomes sacrificial, and that's that's conversion stuff. That's not improvement. That's different life. That's brand new life. And I got to tell you, that's what the God of our program does. That's what the God of my youth does. That's what the God who I try to love and to worship and to follow today, as poorly as I do it, that's the job he's in. To not make me better, but to make me new. That's so much farther than just better, right? So I got to tell you, here's how I think this sort of works. So when I came into AA, let's use stealing as an example. So when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I know I got about 5 minutes. Is that right, brother? I think that's about 5. So when I came into Alcoholics, pardon me?
10.
Okay, great. So when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I stole stuff. I know, I'm sorry, I don't mean to blow your image of me, but yeah, I stole stuff, right? Like a lot of stuff. I was stealing stuff, okay? And when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, if every time I stole something, we'll use an analogy here, I was digging a hole, right? Everything I stole dug a hole. When I came in and woke up a little bit, I realized I'm in a hole. Oh my God, I'm in a hole, right? When I came into AA, the only thing I did was drop the shovel. That was it. I didn't get out of the hole. I wasn't free to leave the hole. I just dropped the shovel. I stopped digging deeper. And then I went through this process. Like I didn't know how to get out of the hole. And I saw you guys, and you guys gave me a new idea that maybe this God could restore me to enough sanity where I could get out of the hole. So I asked him for help in 3. And what he did is he gave me a tool called the 4-step to take a look at all of that pile of stuff that I had stolen outside that hole. And so I started looking at it. I'm still in the hole. I'm not out of the hole yet, right? Ali's walking by. I go, hey, man, look at all the stuff there. I got to tell you what's going on. I gave my 5th step. I start saying some prayers and say, I get out of the hole. My job out of the hole is simply to do this. Fill the hole in. Step 8 and 9, I put the dirt back in the hole. When I finished 9, I was even. I was even. Step 11 allows us to grow a mountain to stand on. And you know, there's no shadow on the top of a mountain. There's none. It's just light and beauty and heaven and him and you. So I don't think that just stopping bad behavior is Alcoholics Anonymous. I think stopping the behavior, being on my knees or in a posture of surrender toward the one who has all power, and allowing him access to the cracked parts of my soul so that he can not just make me different, but make me new so that I can stand on that mountain with him. You know, after that 5th step, there's a beautiful promise. And it says we're walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. Now, I give you, that might just be poetry. that might be amazing wonderment and poetry. Or it may be the truth. I submit to you that my life gets better when I believe that's the truth. I think about, what does that look like? What if I roll that around my brain a little bit, what does that look like? And I see this. I kind of see myself as a kid, and I see him as my dad, and I'm sort of reaching up to him, and I'm kind of holding on. I'm taking his hand. I'm walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. The questions then become very different. If that's true and not poetry, tell me truthfully, what do I have to be afraid of? What do I have to be afraid of? What don't I have? What do I have to manipulate you to go get? What will he not provide for me? Who do I have to wrestle to go make sure I'm respected? What do I have to fight anymore? Why should I worry what you think of me? I'm either walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe, or I'm directing my own life. I think. This idea of glimpse, glance, and gaze, I think that correlates perfectly to losing our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. I don't know what the hereafter is like. I really don't know. But some of the most profound people who have written about prayer call it the Beatific Vision. That is, we stand before God and just are amazed at what we see. And we lose all of our old life in the vision of who and what he is. They call that the Beatific Vision. And I got to tell you, if this helps me lose fear, imagine what standing before him would be. I can't fathom it. I have a spiritual director, and we read things together about prayer, and he tells me and encourages me when I give him thoughts in my prayers and what I sort of experience in God when I'm praying. And if we really think about what is the purpose of prayer, what is prayer? I mean, it's almost, I just want you to think about how strange this sounds in its realness. So what is prayer? Oh, prayer is when a jackass forget my mouth, sorry, an idiot like me absolutely believes that the God of the universe wants to talk to me. And so I'm going to make an effort to actually talk to him and then listen. Do you realize people go into institutions for thoughts like that, right? But we believe it's reality. We believe he wants to hear from us. We believe he wants to hear from us. We believe he wants to love us. I'm going to close with an image of what I think prayer is like from my Father, for the one who has all power. This is what I think it's like. I have this granddaughter, and I don't know if anybody has grandchildren or not, but they're like the most amazing thing on planet Earth. And if you think you have the best grandchildren on the planet, I just want you to inventory that, because I do, and you need some help. So anyways, the point is, I'm at a soccer game for my 7-year-old daughter, Grace. Isn't that a beautiful name, right? And I'm watching her. And I got to tell you, this was the worst soccer game in the history of soccer. It was like 5 to 7 7-year-olds, and they were just running around the ball, kicking each other in the shins. Nobody scored a goal. It was horrible as it relates to soccer. It was a terrible game. I got to tell you, I was 100% mesmerized with this 7-year-old, beautiful, amazing little girl who was trying her best to play a game and failed at every turn. I got to tell you, if an idiot like me can gaze upon that little girl and be moved to tears as I am right now as I tell you this, I think my Father in heaven is equally capable, likely far more capable than I am, to gaze upon his foolish little son and to show me some grace and to show me some compassion and to show me that he loves me. And perhaps even, I don't mean this arrogantly, but maybe even gaze at me and be happy and joyful at who he's turning me into. If you're out there tonight and you're new in Alcoholics Anonymous, I just got to tell you that God loves you. And I found him not by rising above my problems. I found him by having those problems grind me so hard down that I was on my knees begging for mercy and forgiveness and a new life. I pray that I continue to grow in what I think God's kingdom is, at glimpses into glances and ultimately into a gaze. I think that's step 11, at least for me it is. God bless you all. Thanks for having me.